In this video, we play 2-5 cash at the Wynn. We are trying to get to 10k subs. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you thought. Let's go. In the first hand of the night, we have Ace King of Diamonds in the big blind, and the button raises to $20. We 3-bet to $80, and our opponent 4-bets to $220. We are about $1,200 effective here, so pretty deep. I have played with this opponent before. He's an older man, and 4-bets are certainly rare for him. We can pretty strongly narrow his range down to aces, kings, or queens. We just decide to make the call. The flop comes queen, 4, deuce, 2 diamonds. We have flopped 2 overs and the nut flush draw. We check and our opponent actually checks back. The turn is the 5 of clubs. It's no help. We check again, and this time our opponent bets 200. We considered raising here as a semi-bluff, but they can certainly still have aces or kings that they decided to check for pot control, and maybe even sometimes pocket queens. We just make the call. The river is the 5 of diamonds. We get there with the nut flush. There's about $900 in the pot, and we check. Our opponent decides on a sizing of $500. The only hand we are concerned with here is pocket queens. And being that we only have $300 left in our stack after putting in the 500, we are going to jam. All in. Our opponent tanks, and even though it is so little for them to call, they seem to know they are beat. They finally stick in the remaining $300, and we are good as we show our hand. It seems pretty obvious they either had aces or kings. We scoop a nearly $2,500 pot to start the night. In the next hand, we have pocket 10s, and we raise under the gun 1 to $20. The hijack makes a call, and the blinds fold. We are about $1,300 effective, and we cover our opponent. The flop comes king, 9, 6, 2 spades. Out of position here with an underpair to the king, we are going to start with a check. Our opponent bets $20, and we make the call. The turn is the 8 of spades. We check again, and this time our opponent bets $50. Now with a gut shot and a flush draw, I think it's a pretty good spot to turn our hand into a bluff. A semi-bluff. We check raise to 165. If our opponent just has a king, it's going to put them in a pretty tough spot. With that said, they make the call. The river is quite nice. It's a 7 of diamonds. We end up getting there with our straight. This is way better than getting there with a spade, as our spade draw was not very strong. Our opponent could have certainly flopped a flush, but to not go for value here seems quite bad. The plan is to bet big here, and if we get jammed on, we're going to fold. We bet $400 into about almost $430. Our opponent goes pretty deep into the tank, until finally arriving at a very frustrating call.
Horrible.
We end up seeing why this call is so frustrating. Our opponent shows pocket kings for top set. I was not expecting that. She should have definitely 3-bet pre. In the next hand, we have ace 3 of hearts, and we raise in the hijack to $20. The cutoff and the big blind both make the call. The flop comes queen, 5, deuce, 2 hearts. Surprisingly, the big blind decides to lead for $25. With the nut flush draw, an overcard, and a gut shot, we are obviously not folding. We just make the call. The cutoff folds, and the turn is the 5 of diamonds. The big blind is not slowing down. They bet $65 into about $100. Don't think there's much reason to raise here, so we just make the call. The river does not give us a flush. It gives us better, as we see the 4 of clubs. Now, obviously having a flush would be stronger, but having the wheel here makes our hand very disguised. There's now about $250 in the pot, and our opponent bets $100, hoping that our opponent has a queen or a 5 that they certainly couldn't fold. We jam all in for about $400 more. Unfortunately, it seems they didn't have much, as they somewhat quickly make the fold. In general, it's not a great idea to lead into the original raiser. This decision costs our opponent in this hand. In the next hand, we have 10-8 of spades, and there is an under the gun limp for $5. We raise to $25 in the hijack. The button, the small blind, and the big blind all call. The flop comes 9, 8, 3, 2 hearts. It checks to us, and I think we could go either way here. We could bet or check. In this case, we decided to bet $40 into about $100. The button, who we beat earlier with the 10s versus kings, ends up calling, and the big blind goes all in for about $350. If we didn't have the opponent on the button behind us, we might call here, as this is often a flush draw. With that said, we end up making the fold. However, we do get to see how this hand plays out, as the button ends up calling. The turn is the ace of spades, and the river is the 7 of hearts. We were certainly anti-sweating that turn. The man who jammed ends up showing pocket 3s for a set, but the button shows 5 deuce of hearts for a flush. She was obviously trying to get us back from the king's hand as she called pre with 5 deuce of hearts. Our beef is the big blind's downfall this time. Next up, there is an under the gun limp for $5. The hijack calls the $5 and we raise in the cutoff to $30. The button, who seems like a solid rig, ends up 3-betting us to $90. It folds back around to us and we make the call. We are about $1,500 effective and going to a flop that comes King Jack Deuce. We have an open-ended straight draw and a backdoor spade draw. We check and our opponent bets $80 or about a third. We could check raise here, but we decide to just call. The turn is the 4 of hearts. This gives us no help and our opponent ends up betting $280 into about $350. At this point, there's really only 2 choices. It's jam or fold. If we were to call here, the pot would be nearly 1K, and if we didn't hit our river card, we would just be left with nothing. This guy was fairly inactive the entire time I was playing with him, so I decided to give him more credit and ended up just folding. As the pot is being pushed our opponent's way, he does end up flashing the 10 of hearts, which essentially means we got bluffed. He could have definitely had the same hand as us, or turned a hand like ace 10, pocket 10s, or jack 10 into a bluff. Whatever it was, nice hand to him. In the next hand, there is an under the gun 1 raise to $20, and we have ace jack of diamonds in the hijack. We 3-bet to $65. Our opponent makes the call. The flop is very attractive as it comes 10, 9, 5, 2 diamonds. Our opponent checks and we bet $70. Obviously, we have tons of equity, and if we can just take it down with ace high here, that's not so bad either. Our opponent does not agree and makes a call. The turn is the deuce of diamonds. We get there with the nuts. We were pretty deep to start this hand, about $1,200 effective, so we definitely want to continue betting to build a pot. Our opponent checks, and this time we decide to bet 175 into about 275. Once again, our opponent makes the call. The river is very unnecessary. It's the 4 of diamonds. Our opponent checks again, and we have a real blunder here. I must have thought our opponent had a smaller stack because we ended up going all in.
All in.
At the time, I thought this was for about pot, but even so, this is terrible. With 4 diamonds out there and us betting so large, our opponent can literally fold so many hands, including the king of diamonds, because what am I jamming with besides the ace of diamonds? I actually have 0 bluffs here unless I'm just some kind of maniac. We really should have gone smaller, like 1/3 or even less. Obviously, with all of this said, our opponent ended up folding. While annoying, it is important that we recognize our mistakes and learn from them in the future, which is definitely what I'm doing here. In the next hand, we have pocket queens under the gun and we raise to $20. The hijack and the cutoff call. The flop comes 9, 9, 8. We could sometimes start with a check here, but also sometimes bet. I don't think our opponents should have that many 9x here, so we go ahead and start with a bet for value, $35. Just the cutoff calls. The turn is the king of clubs. There's not much of a reason to bet here, and I want to just pot control, so we go ahead and check. The cutoff ends up betting $100. At this point, I think our hand is still too strong to fold, so we make the call and the river comes the deuce of diamonds. We check again, and this time our opponent goes all in for about $400 into about $330. Now, in theory, I think this is close to being a call or a fold, but in practice, it's most likely probably just a fold live. I mean, the only bluffs they really have are 7-6, Jack 10 for missed straights, or maybe hands that they decided to float the flop with that turned club draws. But otherwise, we are not beating much. With all of this said, we are not in the folding kind of mood, and so we make the call. We see the bad news as our opponent shows pocket 8s for a flopped boat. It's not the worst call in the history of calls, but we could have definitely gotten away from it, I think. In the last hand of the night, the under the gun 1 player raises to $20, and we 3-bet in middle position to $65 with ace jack off. This is generally too loose, but we just felt like playing a hand before we left, so it is what it is. It folds back around to the early position opener who makes the call. The flop comes jack 9, 8. It checks to us, and with top pair here on a pretty wet board, I think we just want to bet on the larger side. So we bet $70 into about $140, and our opponent makes the call. The turn is the 8 of spades. Could check here for pot control, could bet. They shouldn't really have any 8x. We're really only concerned with pocket 9s, or our opponent could have queen 10 or pocket 10s. I lean towards betting here as a flush draw comes on the turn and I want to charge any 10x as well. There's about $300 in the pot and we bet 200. We do not face any more aggression as our opponent makes the fold. We end the night on a high note and cash out. What's up, guys? We have cashed out. We bought in for $1,200 total, cashed out for $2,907, so nearly $1,800 profit. Not a bad night, but I was disappointed in 2 plays. I should have folded those queens. People just don't bluff the river. It's really true, they just don't. And the only bluff he can really have is like Jack 10, so there's no bluffs there really. And then the Ace Jack of Diamonds, no reason for me to jam there. I'm only jamming there with the Ace of Diamonds. He can even fold the King of Diamonds. Otherwise, people just don't jam there as a bluff ever. So I should have really bet smaller. I should have targeted some smaller diamond. I should have really bet smaller. Those were the main mistakes, but otherwise it was a pretty good session. Hope you enjoyed. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's go.